At Thanksgiving dinner, my nephew threw a solid silver fork at my face and screamed that his mom said I was just the help. The entire table erupted in laughter while blood dripped onto my plate. I quietly got up and left without saying a single word. That night, my sister Ebony texted me saying, "Know your place." I replied, "I do. Check your mortgage." By dawn, the bank started calling them, and their nightmare had just begun. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who mistook your kindness for weakness. My name is Jasmine, and at 32 years old I have mastered the art of being invisible in plain sight. For the last 5 years, my family has believed I am a struggling tax accountant living in a cramped studio apartment on the south side of Chicago. They see my 10-year-old beige Toyota Camry and my off-rack department store clothes and they see failure. What they do not see is the black card tucked deep inside my wallet or the forensic accounting firm I own that specializes in uncovering corporate fraud. They certainly do not see that I am the shadow investor who quietly bought up the toxic debt of half the businesses in this city, including the one my brother-in-law works for. I created this distance to protect myself. I wanted to know if my family loved me, or for what I could give them. As I pulled my battered sedan into the circular driveway of Ebony and Hunter's sprawling mansion in Highland Park that Thursday afternoon, I got my answer before I even stepped through the door. The house was a monstrosity of new money architecture with towering pillars and excessive windows that looked out onto a manicured lawn that cost more to maintain than most people earn in a year. I parked my car far away from the entrance, tucked behind a hedge, so it would not offend my sister's aesthetic. As I walked up the stone path clutching a bottle of wine I had selected carefully for its vintage, I could hear the party already in full swing. I took a deep breath, bracing myself. The moment I rang the bell, the heavy oak door swung open. It was not my sister greeting me, but my brother-in-law, Hunter. He stood there holding a crystal tumbler of scotch, looking past me as if checking to see if anyone important had arrived behind me. "You are late," Jasmine Hunter said without a hello, stepping aside just enough to let me squeeze past him. "We already started appetizers. Here, take these." He thrust a pile of heavy wool coats into my arms. "The closet is full, so just put these in the guest room upstairs, and try not to wrinkle them. That trench coat is Burberry." I stood there for a moment holding the coats of strangers staring at the man who had married my sister 3 years ago. Hunter was a private equity manager who wore his arrogance like a second skin. He had always treated me with a specific brand of polite disdain reserved for people he considered beneath his tax bracket. I swallowed my pride and walked up the grand staircase. I placed the coats on the bed, smoothing them out. I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired but composed. I told myself I could survive 4 hours. I was wrong. When I came back downstairs, the dining room was a theater of illusions. My mother Beatrice sat at the head of the table wearing a hat that was far too large for being indoors holding court with a glass of champagne. Ebony was next to her glowing in a silk dress that barely concealed the baby bump of her second child. She was busy staging a photo of the turkey for her 50,000 Instagram followers. Everyone was laughing a little too loudly, drinking a little too fast. The air smelled of roasted sage and expensive perfume, but underneath it, I could smell the rot. I noticed things others missed. I saw the slight fray on the cuff of Hunter's dress shirt. I noticed the way my mother's eyes darted anxiously every time the catering staff walked by, as if she was afraid the credit card on file might decline. There was no seat set for me. "Oh, there you are," Ebony said, looking up from her phone. "We ran out of chairs at the main table. You do not mind sitting at the kids' table, right? Someone needs to watch Brayden anyway. He has been a terror all morning." She gestured dismissively toward a small folding table set up in the corner near the kitchen door. My mother chimed in without missing a beat. "It is better this way, Jasmine. You know how you get overwhelmed by adult conversation. Plus, Brayden misses his auntie." I looked at the main table. There were 8 empty chairs. They just did not want me in their picture-perfect Thanksgiving frame. I quietly moved my plate to the folding table where my 8-year-old nephew Braden sat glued to an iPad blasting cartoons at full volume. Sit down, Braden commanded, not looking away from the screen. And get me more juice. I sat down, attempting to engage him. Braden, we do not give orders, we ask politely. And maybe we should turn the iPad off while we eat. The boy finally looked at me. His eyes were cold, spoiled, and entirely devoid of respect. It was the look of a child who hears how his parents speak about people behind closed doors. Mom said I do not have to listen to you, he sneered. Excuse me, I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the heat rising in my chest. Mom says you are just the help, Braden stated loudly. His voice cut through the chatter in the room. The conversation at the main table faltered, but nobody corrected him. Helpers clean and owners eat. That is why you are at the little table. The room went silent. I looked over at my sister. Ebony was sipping her wine, a small smirk playing on her lips. Hunter chuckled, shaking his head as if his son had just told a witty joke. Ebony, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Are you going to correct him? Oh, lighten up, Jasmine. Ebony sighed, rolling her eyes. He is just repeating something he probably heard on TV. Do not be so sensitive. He is just a spirited boy. You would understand if you had kids of your own, but since you are still single and living in that tiny apartment, maybe you should focus on being a fun aunt instead of a discipline warden. I turned back to Braden, who was now stabbing a dinner roll with a silver fork. Braden put the fork down and turned off the iPad. It is time to eat. No, he screamed. He raised his arm and with a force that shocked me, he hurled the heavy silver fork directly at my face. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the tines rotating in the air before the metal struck the high point of my cheekbone just below my left eye. The impact was a dull, heavy thud, followed by a sharp, stinging pain. The fork clattered onto my porcelain plate with a deafening crash. I gasped, bringing my hand to my face. When I pulled it away, my fingers were coated in bright red blood. A drop splattered onto the white tablecloth. Then another. The silence that followed was absolute. But it was not filled with concern. It was filled with annoyance. Great Hunter groaned, slamming his hand on the table. Now we have a scene. Braden, look what you did. You got blood near the turkey. I am bleeding, I whispered, pressing a napkin to my cheek. The blood was soaking through the linen, rapidly hot and sticky. Ebony rushed over, but not to me. She went to Braden, who had started to fake cry the moment he saw the blood. Oh, my poor baby, she cooed, hugging the boy who had just assaulted me. Did mean Auntie Jasmine scare you? It is okay, Mommy is here. She looked up at me, her face twisted in disgust. Look at you, Jasmine. You are bleeding all over the place. Go to the kitchen and clean yourself up. You are traumatizing my son. My mother Beatrice finally spoke up from the head of the table. Her voice was icy. Honestly, Jasmine, I expected better behavior at a family gathering. You provoked him. You know he has sensory processing issues with his iPad. Go put some ice on that and stay in the kitchen until you can compose yourself. We are trying to have a nice dinner here. I stood there, the napkin turning crimson in my hand, looking at the three people who were supposed to be my family. My sister, who mocked me. My brother-in-law, who despised me. And my mother, who blamed me for my own injury. I looked at Braden, who was peeking out from behind Ebony's dress, smiling a wicked, triumphant smile. He knew he had won. He knew he could hurt me and be rewarded for it. In that moment, something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap like a bone breaking. It was a quiet, final severing of a cord that had tethered me to them for 3 decades. The longing for their approval evaporated, leaving behind a cold clarity. I realized then that they did not just think I was poor. They thought I was subhuman. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply dropped the bloody napkin onto the center of Braden's empty plate. The red stain bloomed against the white china like a declaration of war. I am leaving, I said. My voice was steady, eerily calm even to my own ears. Hunter laughed, a harsh barking sound. Good. Go back to your studio apartment. Maybe next year you will learn how to behave in high society. Do not expect a to-go plate. I turned my back on them. As I walked toward the front door, I could hear the clinking of silverware resuming. They were already eating. They did not care if I needed stitches. They did not care if I was safe. They were relieved the help was gone so the owners could enjoy their feast. I walked out into the biting November wind, leaving the coat I had arrived in behind. I would not need it where I was going. I walked past my decoy Toyota and headed 2 blocks down the street to the private garage where my matte black Mercedes G-Wagon was waiting. I climbed into the leather driver's seat and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The cut on my cheek was deep, but the fire in my eyes was deeper. I picked up my phone. It was time to introduce them to the real Jasmine. I opened my secure banking app and dialed the number of my personal attorney. It was time to call in the debt. The heater in my 10-year-old Toyota Camry rattled loudly as I drove away from the manicured lawns of Highland Park. My cheek was still throbbing where the silver fork had struck me, and I could feel the dried blood tightening on my skin. I did not turn the radio on. I needed the silence to process the absolute severance that had just occurred. For years I had played a role. I was Jasmine the struggling accountant. Jasmine the one who needed pity. Jasmine the help. I played it so well that I almost forgot who I really was when I was around them. But the stinging pain in my face was a sharp reminder that playing small had not protected me. It had only made me an easier target. I drove 5 miles to a nondescript self-storage facility tucked behind a row of industrial warehouses. This was my changing room. I punched in my access code and the heavy steel gate rolled back with a groan. I pulled the battered Toyota into Unit 44 and killed the engine. The silence returned. I sat there for a moment, taking a deep breath, exhaling the smell of stale upholstery and my family's disdain. I opened the car door, grabbed my purse, and stepped out. In the adjacent parking spot sat my reality. It was a matte black Mercedes G63 AMG. It sat there like a sleeping beast, its chrome accents glinting in the fluorescent light. This car cost more than the tuition for the private school my nephew Braden attended. I unlocked it, the heavy door closing with a satisfying vault-like thud that shut out the world. I pressed the start button, and the engine roared to life, a low guttural growl that vibrated through the leather seat. I connected my phone, and the smooth jazz playlist I used to decompress filled the cabin. As I backed out, leaving the Toyota and the sad persona of poor Jasmine behind, I felt a shift in my chest. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold clinical focus. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from Ebony. I knew I should not look at it while driving, but the red light ahead gave me a moment. The preview message was exactly what I expected. Mom is crying because you ruined Thanksgiving. You are so selfish. You need to grow up and learn your place in this family. Don't come back until you apologize to Braden for scaring him. I stared at the words. Apologize to the child who threw a fork at my face. Apologize to the sister who watched me bleed and laughed. Learn my place. The audacity was almost impressive. They really believed they held the keys to my happiness. They thought exclusion was a punishment. They had no idea that they were the ones standing on a trap door and I was the one holding the lever. I drove onto the highway, heading toward downtown Chicago. The city lights began to appear on the horizon, a glittering grid of ambition and power. This was my domain. I did not live in a studio apartment on the South Side. I lived in the Loop in a penthouse that occupied the entire 45th floor of the building my company owned. When I arrived, the doorman rushed to open my door, his face lighting up with genuine respect. "Good evening, Ms. Washington. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you had a pleasant dinner." I forced a small smile. "It was eventful, Henry. Thank you." I took the private elevator up. The doors opened directly into my living room. The space was vast, minimalist, and breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan and the city skyline. I kicked off my shoes and walked across the heated marble floors to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of vintage Pinot Noir, the kind that costs $300 a bottle. I took a sip, letting the complex flavors wash away the taste of the cheap grocery store wine Hunter had served. I walked into my home office. It was a glass-walled room dominated by 3 large monitors. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and woke up my system. The screens hummed to life, glowing with the logo of my firm, Vanguard Holdings. To the world. Vanguard Holdings was a faceless investment firm that specialized in distressed assets and high-risk loans. To Hunter, it was the savior that had given him a $1.2 million balloon loan to buy his mansion when traditional banks had laughed at his credit score. What Hunter did not know was that Vanguard Holdings was a shell company. I was the sole owner, I was the board of directors, I was the underwriter, and I was the one he had just called the help. I navigated through the encrypted database, typing in the loan reference number I had memorized years ago. Hunter's file appeared on the center screen. It was a mess of late fees he had negotiated down and missed property tax payments. I scrolled past the financial data to the legal terms of the contract. I had written this contract myself. I knew exactly where to look. Clause 14, Section B, the Morality and Conduct Clause. It stated clearly that if the borrower engages in any conduct that brings disrepute to the lender or causes physical or reputational harm to the lender or its agents, the lender reserves the right to recall the full balance of the loan immediately. I touched the bandage on my cheek. Physical harm, check. I looked at the text message from Ebony calling me the help and demanding an apology. Reputational harm, check. They had insulted the lender directly to her face. I picked up my phone and opened the thread with Ebony. Her typing bubble appeared briefly, then vanished. She was probably expecting me to beg for forgiveness. I typed a response, my thumbs moving with precision. I do know my place, Ebony. It is listed as the primary lien holder on the deed to your house. Check your mortgage. Interest rates just adjusted. I hit send. Then I turned back to my computer screen. My mouse hovered over a red button on the interface labeled Default Action. I did not hesitate. I did not think about Braden's school or Ebony's baby shower or my mother's pride. I thought about the blood on the tablecloth and the laughter. I clicked the button. A dialog box popped up. Confirm immediate recall of loan number 7742 due to breach of contract. I clicked yes. The status bar on Hunter's file changed from active to default. The system automatically generated a flurry of digital actions. Emails were sent to the credit bureaus. A notification was pushed to the county clerk's office, and an automated robocall was scheduled to dial Hunter's cell phone every 15 minutes until the balance was paid in full. I leaned back in my chair, watching the data stream. The trap was sprung. By tomorrow morning, their bank accounts would be frozen. Their credit cards would be declined. And they would realize that the sister they treated like a servant was the master of their fate. I took another sip of wine and watched the city lights. The view was beautiful from up here. And for the first time all day, I finally felt full. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the master bedroom in Highland Park, but for Hunter the day was already starting off wrong. He stood in his state-of-the-art kitchen, frowning at his phone. He was trying to order a recurring shipment of his favorite artisanal coffee beans from a boutique roaster in Seattle. It was a small luxury he felt he deserved after tolerating my presence the night before. He tapped the purchase button again. Transaction declined. The bright red letters flashed on the screen, mocking him. He scoffed, assuming it was a glitch with the roaster's website. He pulled out his wallet and switched cards, entering the details for his Platinum American Express. This card had a limit that could buy a small island. He tapped purchase. Transaction declined. Contact your financial institution. Hunter felt a prickle of irritation on the back of his neck. This was impossible. He made 6 figures. He lived in the most exclusive zip code in Illinois. His cards did not get declined. He tossed the phone onto the marble countertop, the sound echoing in the silent kitchen. He needed to resolve this before Ebony woke up. He could not have his wife thinking there was a cash flow problem, especially not after he had promised her a spa weekend to recover from the stress of Thanksgiving. He dialed the number on the back of his card, pacing the length of the kitchen island. The automated system was infuriatingly slow, but eventually he was connected to a representative. "This is Hunter. My card is not working and I need it fixed immediately. I have a credit score of 800, so whatever hold you put on it needs to be lifted now." There was a pause on the other end. The silence stretched too long. "I am sorry, sir," the representative said, her voice professional but cold. "I cannot lift the hold. Your accounts have been frozen per a court order received early this morning." "Court order?" Hunter stopped pacing. He laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. "You have the wrong person. I have not been to court." "Who authorized this?" The representative hesitated. "The freeze was initiated by the primary lien holder of your mortgage and major creditor, Vanguard Holdings. They have cited a breach of contract regarding immediate default. All assets linked to your Social Security number are currently locked pending a forensic audit." Vanguard Holdings. Hunter knew the name. Of course he knew it. 3 years ago, when traditional banks had laughed at his debt-to-income ratio, Vanguard, Bad, stepped in like a guardian angel. They were a private investment firm that specialized in high-risk loans. He had signed the papers without reading the fine print because he was desperate to get Ebony this house. He had always assumed Vanguard was some faceless conglomerate run by algorithms. He never imagined they would actually check up on him. "This is a mistake," Hunter snapped, though his hand was starting to tremble. "I paid the mortgage last month. You tell Vanguard to back off or I will sue them for every penny they have." "I cannot tell them anything, sir," the rep said. "You will have to contact their legal department directly." "Good day." The line went dead. Hunter stared at the phone. Frozen. His stomach churned. He looked around his kitchen at the stainless steel appliances and the imported tile. It all suddenly felt fragile, like a movie set that could be struck down in an hour. Just then, Ebony walked into the kitchen. She looked rough. Her eyes were puffy from sleep, and she was wearing a silk robe that she had charged to the very card that was now useless. She was holding her phone, looking confused and annoyed. "You are not going to believe this," she said, pouring herself a glass of water from the fridge dispenser. "Jasmine texted me last night. I just saw it. She is delusional, Hunter. Like actually mentally unstable." Hunter looked up, distracted. "What did she say?" Ebony read from the screen, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She said, "I do know my place. It is on the deed to your house. Check your mortgage. Interest rates just adjusted." Ebony laughed, shaking her head. "Can you believe her? She thinks she can scare us with financial terms she probably learned from a pamphlet at her tax job. She probably thinks a mortgage is something you can edit like a Wikipedia page." Hunter did not laugh. The words hit him like a physical blow. "Check your mortgage. Vanguard Holdings. The freeze." The pieces were floating in the air, but he refused to let them click together. It was too absurd. Jasmine drove a 10-year-old Toyota. Jasmine wore clothes from Target. Jasmine was the help. "Mom called her this morning," Ebony continued, tapping furiously on her screen. "She wanted to tell Jasmine off for ruining dinner and making Brayden cry. But the call went straight to voicemail. She blocked Mom. Can you imagine the disrespect? After everything we have done for her, we let her sit at our table, and this is how she repays us, by playing pranks and blocking family." Hunter felt a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Let me see the text," he demanded, snatching the phone from Ebony's hand. "Hey," Ebony protested. "What is your problem?" Hunter stared at the message. The timestamp was 11:45 p.m. The freeze on his accounts had happened at 12:01 a.m. The timing was surgical. He handed the phone back to Ebony and ran out of the kitchen. "Where are you going?" Ebony called out. "Make me a coffee. I have to check something." Hunter yelled back, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into his home office and woke up his computer. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He needed to log into the Vanguard Holdings client portal. He had not looked at it in 2 years. He usually just set up the autopay and forgot about it. He fumbled with the password, resetting it twice because his hands were shaking so badly. Finally, the dashboard loaded. The screen was awash in red. Loan status default. Immediate recall initiated. Outstanding balance, $1.2 million. Due date today. Hunter gasped. It was real. The house was gone. Unless he could pay $1 million by 5 p.m., they would be on the street. But who was Vanguard? Who was pulling the strings? He opened a new tab and went to the Secretary of State's business registry. He typed in Vanguard Holdings LLC. He needed to find the registered agent. He needed a name. Someone he could scream at. Someone he could threaten. The search results loaded. Entity name Vanguard Holdings LLC. Status active. Principal Office 1 South Wacker Drive Suite, 4500 Chicago, Illinois. That address. It was in the financial district. A high-rise. Hunter scanned down to the management section. There was no board of directors listed, just a single managing member. Managing member, J.W. Consulting Group. J.W. Hunter froze. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. J.W. Jasmine Washington. No. He whispered the word to the empty room. No, that is impossible. She is a tax accountant. She makes 50 grand a year. She cannot be Vanguard. He clicked on J.W. Consulting Group. The registered agent address for that entity was different. It was a P.O. box. He recognized the zip code. It was the zip code for the South Side Post Office, near Jasmine's old apartment. The apartment he had mocked 1,000 times. The realization washed over him like ice water. It was not a prank. It was not a hack. It was a long con. For 3 years he had been sending his mortgage checks to a shell company owned by the woman he had treated like a servant. Every time he had insulted her, she had essentially deposited his insult into her bank account. She owned his house. She owned his debt. And after last night, she owned him. Hunter sat back in his expensive leather chair, which he now realized belonged to Jasmine too. He felt bile rise in his throat. He remembered what he had said to her. At least you are useful for something. He remembered Braden throwing the fork. He remembered the blood on her face and how he had worried about the tablecloth. From downstairs he heard Ebony laughing at something on the TV. She had no idea. She was sitting in a house that was already lost, eating food paid for by a card that was already dead, laughing at a sister who was currently holding a sniper rifle aimed at their entire existence. Hunter looked at the screen again. At the red letters. Immediate default. He picked up his phone to call his lawyer, but his hand was shaking so hard he dropped it. It landed on the rug with a dull thud. He stared at it, knowing that no lawyer could save him from the woman who had written the contract he never bothered to read. The help had just become the executioner. The GPS in Hunter's luxury SUV led them deep into a neighborhood where the potholes were deep enough to swallow a tire, and the streetlights had long since burned out. This was the address Jasmine had given the family 5 years ago. It was a crumbling brick tenement building on the south side with barred windows and a front door that hung crookedly on its hinges. Ebony refused to get out of the car, clutching her designer purse, as if the air outside might stain the leather. Hunter, however, was running on a mixture of panic and adrenaline. He slammed the car door and marched up the cracked concrete steps, pounding his fist against the peeling paint of apartment 4B. "Open up!" Jasmine Hunter screamed. "I know you are in there. We need to talk about this banking error right now." There was no answer. He pounded again, harder this time, rattling the frame. A neighbor from the adjacent unit cracked her door open, a chain lock still engaged. "She is not there," the woman said, her voice raspy. "Nobody lives in 4B. That is just where the mail goes. The girl only comes by once a month to collect letters. She has not slept there in years." Hunter froze his fist, hovering in midair. She did not live here. The tiny studio apartment, the poverty, the struggle, it was all a facade. He walked back to the car slowly, his mind racing. If she did not live here, then where was she? And more importantly, where was Vanguard Holdings? He pulled out his phone again, his fingers trembling as he typed the address he had found on the Secretary of State website earlier. 1 South Wacker Drive. That was in the heart of the financial district. Drive Hunter barked at Ebony, who was in the driver's seat. Put this address in. We are going downtown. The drive took 40 minutes in heavy traffic. As they approached the loop, the scenery shifted from decay to opulence. They arrived at the base of a gleaming glass tower that pierced the gray Chicago sky. This was a building that screamed power. It was the kind of place where billion-dollar mergers were signed over scotch and handshakes. Hunter parked the car in a garage that cost more per hour than he made in a week, and the four of them, including a whining Braden, marched into the lobby. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and steel with ceilings that soared 3 stories high. Security guards in dark suits stood like sentinels by the elevators. Hunter approached the reception desk with the entitlement of a man who was used to getting his way. But here in this fortress of real wealth, he looked small. "I am here to see Jasmine Washington," Hunter demanded, leaning over the desk. "And I am here to speak to the management of Vanguard Holdings. It is an emergency." The receptionist did not flinch. She typed something into her terminal, her face impassive. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "I am her brother-in-law," Hunter snapped. "I do not need an appointment. Tell her we are coming up." "I cannot do that, sir," the receptionist said coolly. "The 45th floor is a secure level. Unless you are on the list, you cannot pass the turnstiles." "My mother." Beatrice stepped forward, adjusting her hat, trying to summon her church lady authority. "Young woman, this is a family matter. My daughter is playing games with us, and we need to see her immediately. Call her right now." The receptionist picked up the phone, pressing a single button. She spoke in a hushed tone, then nodded. She hung up and looked at them with a strange expression. It was not fear, it was almost pity. "Ms. Washington says you may go up. She has unlocked the express elevator for you." They walked past the security guards, who watched them closely. The elevator ride was silent and impossibly fast. Their ears popped as they ascended past the 20th floor, then the 30th, then the 40th. When the doors slid open with a soft chime, they stepped out into a world they did not recognize. There was no receptionist desk here. There was only a sprawling, open space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a 360-degree view of Lake Michigan and the city skyline. The walls were adorned with abstract art that looked like original pieces, not prints. The furniture was sleek, modern, and Italian. The air smelled of fresh lilies and money. Jasmine was sitting at a massive desk at the far end of the room. She was not wearing the frumpy cardigan she had worn to dinner last night. She was wearing a tailored navy power suit that fit her perfectly. Her hair was pulled back in a sharp professional bun. She held a porcelain teacup in one hand and was reading a file with the other. She did not look up as they entered. "Jasmine," Beatrice gasped, her voice echoing in the vast space. "What is this? Whose office is this?" "It is mine," Mother Jasmine said calmly, setting the teacup down on a coaster. "Welcome to Vanguard Holdings. Please do not touch anything. The sculpture to your left is worth more than your car." Ebony looked around, her eyes wide with shock that was quickly replaced by a burning, jealous rage. "You own this. You own all of this." "I do," Jasmine replied, leaning back in her leather chair. "Then why?" Beatrice screamed, marching toward the desk, her face turning red. "Why did you let us think you were poor? Why did you let your sister struggle to pay for her wedding? Why did you let Hunter stress about money? You sat there at Thanksgiving eating our food while you were sitting on millions. You are selfish, Jasmine. You are a deceitful, selfish girl." Hunter was not screaming. He was staring at the nameplate on her desk. CEO, Jasmine Washington. He looked at the view, then back at her. He realized suddenly that the mouse had not just trapped the cat. The mouse owned the house the cat lived in. "I did not hide anything from you," Jasmine said, her voice dropping a few degrees in temperature. "I just never told you." And you never asked. And you? You never asked me about my day. You never asked me about my career. You only asked me to pass the gravy or clean the dishes. You saw what you wanted to see. You wanted a failure so you could feel superior. I simply let you have it. You are a liar, Ebony spat, stepping forward, dragging Braden by the hand. You manipulated us. You tricked Hunter into signing that loan. I did not trick anyone, Jasmine said, standing up. She picked up a thick document from her desk and tossed it toward Hunter. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right at the edge. That is the loan agreement you signed 3 years ago, Hunter, Jasmine said. You were so desperate to impress Ebony with a mansion you could not afford that you did not even have a lawyer review it. You just saw the money and signed. Hunter looked down at the document. He recognized his own signature on the cover page. I suggest you turn to page 14. Hunter, Jasmine continued, her voice sharp as a razor. It is the section titled Borrower Conduct. Tell me, Hunter, did you read the fine print before you called the owner of your mortgage the help in front of her own family? Hunter swallowed hard. His throat felt like it was filled with sand. He looked up at Jasmine, and for the first time in his life he was not looking at his wife's little sister. He was looking at a predator, and he was the prey. Hunter stared at the thick document sliding across the polished mahogany desk, but he did not pick it up. He did not have to. The cover page was emblazoned with the Vanguard Holdings logo, a stylized lion that looked predatory and unforgiving. I watched his throat bob as he swallowed hard, trying to moisten a mouth that had suddenly gone dry. The air conditioning in my office was set to a crisp 68 degrees, but I could see beads of sweat forming along his hairline. Go ahead, Hunter, I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my legs. Read it. Or would you prefer a visual aid? I did not wait for his answer. I picked up a slim silver remote and pressed a button. The sheer blinds on the far wall descended, blocking out the panoramic view of Chicago. A high-definition projector hummed to life, and a digital copy of the loan agreement appeared on the massive screen behind me. It was magnified so large that every comma and period looked like a boulder. I typed a command on my keyboard and the document scrolled down rapidly, stopping at page 14. I highlighted a paragraph in bright yellow. Clause 14, Section B. I read aloud, my voice calm and steady, filling the silent room. The borrower agrees that any conduct resulting in physical injury, harassment, or reputational damage to the lender or the lender's appointed agents shall constitute a material breach of this agreement. In such an event, the lender reserves the right to accelerate the loan and demand immediate repayment of the full principal and accrued interest. I put the remote down. The silence in the room was heavy enough to crush a lung. Hunter blinked, looking from the screen to me and back again. His arrogance was starting to crack, revealing the desperate man beneath. He shook his head slowly, a nervous smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. This is ridiculous, he stammered, his voice pitching up an octave. You are twisting words, Jasmine. That clause is boilerplate. It is meant for, like, if I punched a loan officer or burned down the bank. It is not meant for Thanksgiving dinner. Is it not? I asked, raising an eyebrow. The contract says physical injury to the lender. I am the lender, Hunter. I am Vanguard Holdings. And last night in your dining room, I sustained a physical injury. I raised my hand and slowly peeled back the medical tape on my cheek. The gauze came away, revealing the angry purple bruise and the jagged cut where the silver fork had pierced my skin. The swelling had gone down slightly, but it still looked brutal against my complexion. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Ebony looked away, unable to stare at the consequence of her parenting. That is an assault, Hunter, I said, pointing to the wound. In the eyes of the law, and in the eyes of this contract, that is a battery committed on your property by a resident of your property against the primary lien holder. Oh, come on, Hunter shouted, throwing his hands up. It was a fork, Jasmine. A fork thrown by an 8-year-old boy. It was an accident, a tantrum. You are going to take my house because a kid missed his nap time. You are insane. Ebony found her voice then, stepping up beside her husband. She crossed her arms, trying to look intimidating, but she just looked frightened. This is petty, Jasmine. Even for you. You are weaponizing a child's mistake. Brayden did not mean to hurt you. He was just playing. And you are going to ruin our lives over a scratch. A scratch, I repeated quietly. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. Let us be clear about something. It was not just the fork, it was the words. Reputational damage. That is in the contract, too. I turned back to my computer. You see, Hunter, when you signed this loan 3 years ago, you were desperate. Your private equity firm was drowning in bad crypto investments. You needed cash fast, and no reputable bank would touch you. Vanguard gave you a lifeline. But because you were high risk, I installed certain safeguards. Standard procedure for volatile assets. Safeguards? Hunter asked, his face draining of color. What safeguards? I tapped a key. The screen behind me changed. Gone was the legal document. In its place was a grainy but high-definition video feed. I require all collateral properties to be monitored, I explained, to ensure the asset is being maintained. The cameras are discreet, of course, but they record everything, including the dining room. On the screen, the scene from last night played out. It was like watching a horror movie where you know the jump scare is coming. There we were sitting at the table. There was the glint of the chandelier, and there was the audio crisp and clear. Mom says I do not have to listen to you. The digital voice of Brayden rang out in the office. You are just the help. Helpers clean, owners eat. I watched my family watch themselves. I saw Mama Beatrice flinch as she heard her own silence on the recording. I saw Hunter smirk on the screen a split second before the violence. Then came the throw. The camera caught the arc of the heavy silver fork perfectly. It hit me with a sickening thud. But the worst part was not the hit. It was what happened after. On the screen, while I was clutching my bleeding face, Ebony started laughing. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. Do not be so sensitive, she said on the video. Hunter's voice followed. At least you are useful for something, Jasmine. I paused the video right there. The image froze on Hunter's sneering face. I looked at the real Hunter standing in my office. He looked like he wanted to vomit. That does not look like an accident, Hunter, I said, my voice ice cold. And that does not sound like a child playing. That sounds like a family teaching a child that his aunt is a subhuman servant who deserves to bleed. I stood up and walked around the desk, closing the distance between us. My heels clicked on the marble floor, echoing like gunshots. You called the owner of your mortgage the help, I whispered, leaning in close enough to smell the fear on him. You laughed when the lender was assaulted. You violated Clause 14b not just with violence, but with contempt. You broke the morality clause because you have no morality. Hunter stepped back, hitting the edge of the glass coffee table. He looked at Ebony for help, but she was staring at the frozen image of herself, laughing, looking horrified, not by her actions but by the fact that they were recorded. You spied on us, Ebony whispered, her voice trembling. You had cameras in our house for 3 years. I monitored my investment, I corrected her. And it is a good thing I did. Because now I have proof. This is not just a banking error, Ebony. This is cause. I have the legal right to foreclose. And I have the video evidence to defend that foreclosure in any court in America. Hunter sank onto the leather sofa, his legs giving out. He put his head in his hands. 3 years, he muttered. You held this over us for 3 years. I did not hold anything over you, I said, walking back to my chair. I gave you a chance. I gave you a home. I gave you money when nobody else would. All you had to do was treat me with basic human decency. All you had to do was tell your son to respect his aunt. But you could not even do that. I picked up the remote and turned off the projector. The screen went black, plunging the room back into the soft, natural light of the afternoon. The grace period is over. Hunter, I said, sitting down and picking up my tea. You have 48 hours to pay the balance of $1.2 million. or get out of my house, and do not think about damaging the property on your way out. Remember, I am watching. I sat alone in my office as the sun began to set over Chicago, watching the city lights flicker to life one by one. The silence should have been peaceful, but the air felt heavy with anticipation. I knew my family. I knew that narcissists do not reflect on their behavior when they are cornered. They attack. They rewrite history to make themselves the victim. I did not have to wait long for the counterstrike. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. It was a notification from Instagram. Ebony is live. I picked up the phone and tapped the screen. I was not following her from my personal account, which she had blocked hours ago. I was watching from a burner account I used for due diligence on potential investments. The screen loaded, and there she was. Ebony was sitting in her walk-in closet, the one filled with clothes she could no longer afford. She had set up her ring light perfectly to cast a soft, sympathetic glow on her face. She was not wearing the designer dress from earlier. She was wearing an oversized gray sweatshirt, looking small and vulnerable. Her mascara was artfully smudged beneath her eyes as if she had been crying for hours. The viewer count was climbing rapidly. 5,000, 10,000, 50,000. "Hey guys," she whispered into the camera, wiping away a tear that looked rehearsed. "I did not want to do this. You know I like to keep my page positive. I like to share my wins and my family and my joy, but today my heart is just shattered." I leaned back in my chair, sipping my cold tea, watching the performance. "My sister Jasmine," she continued, her voice trembling. "You guys know I have tried to help her for years. We gave her money when she was struggling. We let her into our home. We let her be around my son Brayden, even though she is unstable. But today, we found out the truth." She paused for dramatic effect, letting the comments roll in. "Poor Ebony. Stay strong, Mama. What happened?" "She has been scamming us," Ebony said, looking directly into the lens. "It turns out she has been running some kind of illegal lending scheme. She manipulated my husband Hunter into signing some papers years ago when his business was going through a rough patch. We thought she was helping us because we are family. But she was setting a trap. She waited until we were vulnerable, and now she is trying to steal our home. She is trying to kick me and my children out on the street." The comments section exploded with vitriol. "What a snake. Sue her. Expose her. She sounds jealous of you." Ebony read a few of the comments and nodded, sniffing loudly. "I think she is jealous, guys. She has always been jealous of my marriage and my success. She attacked me today. She screamed at my son. She is trying to extort us for money we do not owe. I am just so scared for my safety. I do not know what she is capable of." I watched as my own sister painted a portrait of a monster and gave it my name. She did not mention the fork. She did not mention the insults. She did not mention the fact that they had lived in luxury on my dime for 3 years. She simply weaponized her audience. Within minutes, my anonymous account was seeing hashtags like "Justice for Ebony" and "Cancel Jasmine" popping up. I did not feel angry. I did not feel sad. I felt like a surgeon looking at a tumor. This was necessary. I needed this to happen. I pressed the record button on my screen capture software. Every lie she told was being archived. Every accusation was being timestamped. She thought she was winning the court of public opinion. She did not realize she was handing me evidence for a court of law. Just as the live stream ended with Ebony begging her followers to donate to a GoFundMe she had just created to save her home, my email pinged. It was a letter marked urgent from a law firm I recognized, Sterling and Associates. They were known for 2 things: being incredibly expensive and being incredibly aggressive. Hunter had clearly found someone to take his case, probably on a contingency basis, by lying to them about the facts. I opened the attachment. The letter was signed by a Richard Sterling. The tone was dripping with condescension. "Dear Ms. Washington, we represent Mr. and Mrs. Hunter Davis regarding the fraudulent loan agreement you induced them to sign. It has come to our attention that you are attempting to extort our clients by threatening foreclosure based on frivolous claims of a morality clause violation. Be advised that your predatory lending practices are illegal. We demand that you immediately cease all collection activities and release the lien on the property. If you do not comply within 24 hours, we will file criminal charges for extortion and fraud. We will also be suing for emotional distress caused to Mrs. Davis and her minor child. Do not test us. You are a small fish playing in a big pond. I read the letter twice. A small fish. That was funny. Richard Sterling was a bully in a $3,000 suit who thought intimidation was the same thing as litigation. He assumed I was just a bitter relative with a little bit of money. He had not done his research. He did not know that Vanguard Holdings had a legal team that made his firm look like a strip mall operation. I picked up my desk phone and dialed a number I had on speed dial. "David," I said when my general counsel answered. "I am watching the live stream right now." "Jasmine," David replied, his voice calm and professional. "And I just saw the email from Sterling. Do you want me to respond?" "Not yet," I said, staring at the screen where Ebony's follower count was still rising. "I want to give them enough rope. Let them think they have scared me. Let them think silence is weakness." "So we wait?" David asked. "No," I said, standing up and walking to the window. The city lights were bright now, a sea of diamonds against the dark water of the lake. "We do not wait. We escalate. Activate Phase 2. "Phase 2, David repeated. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there is no going back. Their reputation will be incinerated." "They incinerated my reputation first." "David," I said, touching the bandage on my cheek. "They wanted a public fight, so let us give them one. I want you to file a defamation suit against Ebony Davis, seeking $5 million in damages. Use the livestream recording as Exhibit A." "And for Hunter?" David asked. "For Hunter," I continued, my voice hardening. "I want you to release the financial reality. They called me a scammer. Let us show the world who the real scammers are. Release the public records. Show the credit card defaults. Show the second and third mortgages they tried to take out behind my back. Show the emails where Hunter begged for extensions, and send a copy of everything to Richard Sterling. Let him see exactly what kind of clients he is representing." "Understood," David said. "I will have the filings ready by morning. And David," I added before hanging up. "Yes, Jasmine. Make sure the process server delivers the defamation lawsuit to Ebony while she is live streaming tomorrow. I want her followers to see her reaction." I hung up the phone. On my computer screen, Ebony's face was frozen in a thumbnail, looking sad and perfect. Below it, the comments were still rolling in, calling for my destruction. They had no idea that the storm was not coming for me. It was coming from me. I turned off the monitor, plunging the room into darkness. I was not the help anymore. I was the karma they had ordered, and I was about to serve it cold. The morning sun over Chicago usually brought with it the promise of a new day, but for my sister Ebony and her husband Hunter, it brought the cold, hard light of truth. I sat in my office at Vanguard Holdings with a fresh cup of tea, watching the digital clock strike 8 a.m. This was the time the city's most respected financial publication, the Chicago Business Journal, released its morning edition. I had not paid them to write the story. I simply provided their investigative journalists with the public court filings from the defamation lawsuit my lawyer had filed late last night. Public records are a beautiful thing because they do not lie. The headline was not subtle. It read, "The influencer illusion when luxury is leased and the mansion is in default." I clicked on the article. It was a masterpiece of forensic journalism. It did not just mention Ebony and Hunter by name, it used them as a case study for a growing epidemic of financial fraud among social media personalities. The reporter had dug deep. The article revealed that Hunter's private equity firm had not made a profit in 4 years. It exposed that the Bentley he drove was a lease in his company's name that was 3 months behind on payments. It showed that Ebony's closet, full of designer bags, was largely funded by high-interest credit cards that were currently maxed out. But the most damaging part was the mortgage. The article clearly stated that the couple lived in a property owned by a private lender and were facing immediate eviction due to non-payment and breach of contract. I leaned back and waited. The fallout would not be instantaneous, but it would be catastrophic. Across town in the mansion that was no longer theirs, Ebony was likely waking up to a nightmare. I imagined her reaching for her phone expecting sympathy from her followers. Instead, she would find that the narrative had shifted. The internet loves a victim, but it hates a liar. By 9:30, the first domino fell. I received an alert that one of Ebony's major sponsors, a high-end organic baby formula company, had issued a press statement. They were terminating their partnership with Ebony Davis, effective immediately, citing their zero-tolerance policy for financial misconduct and dishonesty. I watched via the hidden camera feed I still had access to. Ebony was standing in the kitchen, her face pale. Her phone was ringing incessantly. I could hear her voice rising in panic. "What do you mean you are pulling the campaign?" she screamed into the receiver. "That is a $50,000 contract. You cannot just cancel it. I have already spent the advance." She listened for a moment, then threw the phone onto the counter. It slid across the marble and hit the fruit bowl. She grabbed her hair, pulling at the roots. "Hunter," she shrieked. "Hunter, get down here!" Hunter walked into the kitchen looking like a ghost. He was unshaven, still wearing the same clothes from yesterday. He held a tablet in his hand. "It is over, Ebony," he said, his voice hollow. "Everyone knows. My partners are calling me. They want to buy me out for pennies. They say I am a liability. They say I jeopardize the firm's reputation by getting sued for fraud." "Do something," Ebony yelled. "You are the man. Fix this. Call a lawyer. Call Jasmine." "I cannot call Jasmine," Hunter snapped, slamming the tablet down. "She is the one doing this, Ebony. She released the records. She destroyed us." Just then, Ebony's phone rang again. She looked at the screen and her face went white. It was Clarissa, the president of the Parent-Teacher Association at Braden's exclusive private school. This was the inner circle Ebony had spent years trying to infiltrate. Ebony composed herself, wiping her face and answering with a fake, sweet voice. "Hi, Clarissa. How are you?" I could not hear Clarissa's side of the conversation, but I could see Ebony's expression crumble. The fake smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter humiliation. "But Clarissa, that is just gossip," Ebony stammered. "We are not fraudsters. It is a misunderstanding with my sister. She is mentally ill." Ebony paused, listening. "Please do not do this," she begged. "The winter gala is tonight. I bought a table. I am the chair of the decoration committee." She listened again. Then she lowered the phone slowly, her hand trembling. The call had ended. Ebony turned to Hunter, her eyes wide with shock. "They uninvited us. Clarissa said the board voted. They do not want us at the gala. She said they do not want to be associated with scandal. She said maybe we should look for another school for Braden next semester because the tuition check might bounce." The silence in the kitchen was deafening. The social standing Ebony had built her entire identity around had evaporated in a single morning. She was no longer the envy of the neighborhood. She was the pariah. And then the sadness turned to rage, pure, unadulterated, toxic rage. But she could not direct it at me because I was untouchable in my ivory tower, so she turned on the only target she had left. "This is your fault!" Ebony screamed, lunging at Hunter. "You told me you were rich. You told me you were a genius investor. You are a fraud, Hunter. You are a broke loser who borrowed money from my sister." "Shut up," Ebony, Hunter warned, stepping back, his face darkening. "No, I will not shut up," she yelled, getting in his face. "You let me humiliate myself. You let me brag about this house, and it was never ours. You are not a man. You are a leech. No wonder your father never respected you. No wonder you have to steal from women to survive." Hunter's eyes narrowed. The vein in his forehead pulsed. The pressure of the debt, the public shaming, the loss of his career, and now his wife's emasculation of him was too much. "I said shut up," Hunter roared. "I should have married your brother," Ebony spat. "At least he has real money." The sound was sharp and sickening. Hunter's hand connected with Ebony's cheek, the same cheek where the fork had hit me yesterday. The force of the slap sent her stumbling back into the island counter. She gasped, clutching her face, staring at him in disbelief. I sat in my office, my hand flying to my mouth. I had wanted revenge. I had wanted to strip them of their assets and their pride. But I had never wanted this. I was witnessing the physical disintegration of a family. Hunter stared at his hand, breathing heavily, as if waking up from a trance. "Ebony, look, Get away from me," Ebony whispered, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed a steak knife from the block on the counter, brandishing it with a shaking hand. "Get away from me, or I swear to God I will kill you." I did not hesitate. I picked up my office phone and dialed 911. "I need to report a domestic disturbance," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "The address is 452 Oakwood Drive. There is a weapon involved. Please hurry." I hung up and looked at the screen. Ebony was backing away into the living room holding the knife while Hunter stood in the kitchen looking defeated. My revenge was complete. I had stripped them of their money, their reputation, and their social standing. But seeing them now stripped of their humanity, I felt no joy. I only felt a cold, grim resolve to finish what I started. The house needed to be cleared, not just of debt, but of the toxicity that had festered within its walls. I watched the flashing lights of the police cars pull into the driveway on the monitor. The final act was beginning. The receptionist buzzed me shortly after lunch, and her voice was hesitant. She told me that an older woman was in the lobby refusing to leave until she saw me. She said the woman was clutching a Bible and a photo album and crying to the security guards about how her daughter had hardened her heart against God. I told the receptionist to send her up. I knew this moment was coming. The legal notices and the public humiliation had failed to stop me, so now they were deploying the ultimate weapon. My mother, Beatrice. When the elevator doors opened, she did not look like the imperious matriarch who had presided over Thanksgiving dinner just 2 days ago. She looked small. She was wearing her Sunday best, a navy blue suit with a lace collar, but her shoulders were slumped. She walked into my office clutching a worn leather photo album to her chest like a shield. She looked around the expansive room, taking in the luxury that she had claimed was funded by fraud, and for a second, I saw a flicker of greed in her eyes before she masked it with a look of pious suffering. "Hello, Mother," I said, remaining seated behind my desk. I did not offer her tea. I did not offer her a seat. "Jasmine, baby," she began, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and performance. "Why are you doing this? Why are you destroying your own flesh and blood? The Lord is watching you, Jasmine. He does not like ugly." I stared at her unmoved. "The Lord also says, 'Thou shalt not steal,' Mother. And your golden child and her husband tried to steal $1 million from me." Beatrice walked over to the desk and placed the photo album on top of the legal files. She opened it to a page from 20 years ago. It was a picture of me and Ebony playing in a sprinkler in the backyard. We were laughing. We looked innocent. "Look at this," she whispered, tapping the plastic cover. "You two were inseparable. You loved your sister. Ebony used to braid your hair. She used to hold your hand when you crossed the street. How can you throw her out on the street now? She is pregnant, Jasmine. She has a child. Where is your mercy? The Bible says, 'Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another just as God in Christ forgave you.'" I looked at the photo. I remembered that day. I remembered that 5 minutes after that picture was taken, Ebony had pinched me hard enough to leave a bruise because I was getting more attention from our father. I remembered crying, and I remembered you telling me to stop being a crybaby. I closed the album firmly. "Save the sermon, Mother," I said, my voice flat. "You did not come here to preach. You came here because Ebony sent you. She thinks if she sends her mommy to guilt trip me, I will tear up the foreclosure notice. But that is not going to happen. Beatrice's face hardened. She straightened up, dropping the sad old lady act. You are being cruel, Jasmine. This is not about money. This is about family. You have so much. Look at this office. Look at your clothes. You are swimming in money. Why do you need their house? Why do you need to humiliate Hunter? He is a good man. He made a mistake. A mistake, I repeated, laughing humorlessly. He called me the help. He laughed when his son assaulted me. And he signed a contract he had no intention of honoring. That is not a mistake, Mother. That is character. He is under stress, Beatrice argued, waving her hand dismissively. The market is tough, but he has always been good to us. When your father got sick, Hunter stepped up. He paid for those treatments, Jasmine. He paid for the private room at the hospital. He paid for the funeral. He was there when we needed him. And now when he needs you, you turn your back. You are ungrateful. I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. This was the narrative they had spun for 5 years. The myth of Hunter the Savior. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a file. It was not a thick legal file. It was a thin folder containing bank transfer records from 5 years ago. You really believe that, do you not? I asked, standing up. You really believe Hunter paid for Dad's cancer treatment? I know he did, Beatrice snapped. He told us he did. He said he handled it. He told me not to worry about the bills because he was taking care of the family. That is what a real man does, Jasmine. I slid the folder across the desk. Open it, I said. Beatrice hesitated. She looked at the folder, then at me. Her hands shook as she reached out and flipped it open. The first page was a wire transfer receipt. $50,000 to Chicago Memorial Hospital. The sender was not Hunter Davis. The sender was J.W. Consulting. The second page was another transfer. $20,000 for hospice care. Sender J.W. Consulting. The third page was the funeral home invoice, paid in full, by J.W. Consulting. Beatrice stared at the papers. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. She flipped through them again, looking for Hunter's name. It was nowhere to be found. I paid for it, Mother, I said, my voice breaking slightly despite my best efforts to stay strong. I paid for every single chemo session. I paid for the morphine. I paid for the mahogany casket you insisted on. Hunter did not pay a dime. He was broke even back then. He took the credit because it made him look like a big shot, and I let him, because I did not want Dad to worry that his daughter was the one keeping him alive. I wanted him to think his family was secure. Beatrice looked up from the papers. Her eyes were wide. You, she whispered, but you were working at the library. You were driving that old car. I was building my company, I said. I was living below my means so I could save Dad. While Ebony was buying purses and Hunter was leasing cars to look rich, I was actually writing the checks that kept this family afloat. And you know what the worst part is, Mother? You never even thanked him. You thanked Hunter. You praised Hunter at the funeral. You told everyone how blessed we were to have a wealthy son-in-law. And I stood there in the back and said nothing, because I loved you. Beatrice dropped the folder. She slumped into the chair opposite my desk. For a moment I thought I had broken through. I thought she would finally see me. I thought she would apologize for years of neglect and favoritism. She looked at me, and tears welled up in her eyes. But they were not tears of remorse. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, her voice gaining a sudden sharp edge. If you had this kind of money, Jasmine, why did you let us live like that? Why did you let me worry about the electric bill? Why did you let your sister struggle? I stared at her in disbelief. I just proved that I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to save her husband, and her reaction was to accuse me of holding out on her. I did not let you struggle, I said. I paid off your credit cards 3 times, Mother. I just did it anonymously so you would not feel ashamed. But clearly shame is not something you are capable of feeling. Beatrice stood up, clutching the photo album again. She had processed the information, and she had made her choice. She chose the lie. It does not matter who paid, she said, sniffing loudly, regaining her composure. The past is the past. What matters is right now, and right now you are hurting your sister, Even if you paid for the hospital, it does not give you the right to destroy Ebony. She has a reputation, Jasmine. She has a standing in this community. You are just a single woman with a business. You do not have a family to protect. You can afford to be generous. I felt the final severing of the bond. It was clean and precise. She was admitting it to my face. Ebony's reputation was more important than my sacrifice. Ebony's comfort was worth more than my dignity. I am not the one destroying her mother, I said, walking to the door and opening it. The truth is destroying her. And as for my family, I am protecting it. I am protecting the little girl in that photo album who was kicked out of her house at 18 because she wanted to study finance instead of marrying a pastor. Remember that, Mother. You put my suitcase on the porch and told me not to come back until I learned to submit. Well, I never learned to submit. I learned to own. Beatrice stopped at the door. She looked at me one last time. There was no love in her eyes, only a cold calculation. You will be lonely, Jasmine, she spat. Money cannot hug you at night. It can buy a very warm blanket, I replied. And it keeps the wolves away, even the ones dressed in Sunday suits. Goodbye, Mother. I closed the door in her face. I heard her gasp on the other side. Then I heard her footsteps retreating down the hall. I walked back to my desk and sat down. My hands were shaking. I put them flat on the cool mahogany surface until they steadied. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer. Proceed with the eviction, I said, and add my mother's name to the list of individuals banned from the building. I hung up. I looked at the empty chair where she had sat. The plea had failed. The guilt trip had failed. Now there was nothing left but the end. I watched the GPS tracker on Hunter's leased Bentley ping in a part of Chicago that he usually pretended did not exist. He was not at a country club, and he was certainly not at a bank. He was parked behind a derelict warehouse in the industrial district where the streetlights were broken and the only business being conducted was off the books. Desperation has a distinct smell, and even from my office tower, I could practically smell the fear sweating off him. Hunter was meeting with a man named Silas. I knew Silas because 2 years ago, I had built a case against one of his associates for tax evasion. Silas was a hard money lender, which is a polite term for a loan shark. He charged 60% interest, and his late fees usually involved a baseball bat. The fact that Hunter was seeking him out meant he had exhausted every legitimate avenue. He was trying to borrow the $1.2 million to pay me off, hoping that a criminal would be more forgiving than his sister-in-law. I tapped into the audio feed from Hunter's phone. I had not just installed cameras in the house, I had installed a trackerware suite on his devices when he signed the original loan agreement. It was all legal, buried in the technology clause. He never read. Please, Silas. Hunter's voice was shaking. I just need a bridge loan. 48 hours. I have assets. The house is worth $3 million. The house is in default. Hunter Silas's voice was gravelly and amused. I read the news. You do not own that house. Some lady named Washington owns it, and word on the street is, she is airtight. I do not lend against assets you do not control. Come on, Hunter pleaded. I am good for it. I have a deal closing next week. A crypto play. It is going to yield 10 times the investment. Silas laughed, a cold, harsh sound. You are radioactive, Hunter. Nobody in this city is going to touch you. You are drowning, and I am not looking to get wet. Get out of my face before I decide to take that watch as a consultation fee. I heard the car door slam. Hunter was alone again. 10 minutes later, my secure email server pinged. It was a transfer request from an anonymous wallet address. Hunter was trying to send me $500,000 in cryptocurrency. The subject line read, "Partial payment. Please stop the eviction." I stared at the screen. He was trying to pay a registered mortgage debt with untraceable digital currency likely scraped together from the very bottom of his failed investment schemes, or perhaps borrowed from someone even worse than Silas. I picked up the phone and called my compliance officer. Reject the transfer, I said. Flag it as suspicious activity. The source of funds is unverified, and considering the debtor is currently under investigation for fraud, accepting this money would make us complicit in money laundering. Send him a formal rejection notice stating that Vanguard Holdings only accepts certified funds from domestic banks. I hung up. I could imagine Hunter's face when he got the notification. He thought money was just money. He did not understand that dirty money leaves a stain that never washes out, and I was not about to let him dirty my hands. Hunter returned to the mansion an hour later, but he did not go inside immediately. He sat in the driveway making one last call. This time he was not calling a lender. He was calling a private investigator. I need dirt, Hunter whispered into the phone. Her name is Jasmine Washington. She runs Vanguard Holdings. Dig deep. I want everything. Who is she sleeping with? Is she skimming off the top? Does she have a drug problem? Every closet has a skeleton. Find hers so I can bury her. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of tea. He was trying to blackmail me. It was a pathetic move, but a predictable one. When you cannot win on merit, you try to destroy the opponent's character. He hired a man named Miller, a bottom-feeder PI who specialized in catching cheating spouses and digging up scandal for divorce cases. I waited. 3 hours passed. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across my office. I used the time to review the foreclosure documents, ensuring every I was dotted and every T was crossed. Finally, Hunter's phone rang. It was Miller. What did you find? Hunter answered immediately, his voice thick with anticipation. Tell me she is embezzling. Tell me she is a secret alcoholic. There was a long pause on the other end. Mr. Davis Miller sighed. I have been running this woman's life through every database I have access to. I checked her financials, her travel records, her medical history, and her personal associates, and Hunter pressed. And she is a ghost, Miller said. Or a saint. I do not know which is worse. She pays her taxes early. She has zero debt. She volunteers at a literacy center on weekends. She does not date. She does not drink to excess. She goes to work, she goes home, and she reads. You are not looking hard enough, Hunter shouted, spitting onto the dashboard. Everyone has something. Check her college years. Check her ex-boyfriends. I checked. Miller snapped, losing his patience. She graduated summa cum laude. Her ex-boyfriends all say the same thing, that she was too focused on her career for a relationship. Look, buddy, I can find dirt where there is dirt, but this woman is squeaky clean. She is cleaner than a convent floor. You are wasting my time and your money. I am keeping the retainer. Do not call me again. The line went dead. I watched on the driveway camera as Hunter dropped the phone. It slid between the seats. He let out a scream of primal frustration, pounding his fists against the steering wheel until the horn blared, echoing through the quiet upscale neighborhood. He had tried to buy his way out. He had tried to cheat his way out. He had tried to blackmail his way out. And every door had slammed in his face. He got out of the car and stormed into the house. I switched the feed to the interior cameras. Ebony was in the living room trying to pack a box of crystal stemware, her eyes red from crying. She looked up as Hunter entered, expecting news. Did you get the money? She asked, her voice trembling with a sliver of hope. Hunter did not answer. He walked past her to the bar cart. He grabbed a bottle of Macallan 18, the same whiskey he had denied me a glass of on Thanksgiving, because he said it was too good for my palate. He uncorked it and took a long swig straight from the bottle. Hunter, Ebony cried, standing up. What is happening? Talk to me. There is nothing to talk about, Hunter roared, turning on her, her eyes wild. She is a robot, Ebony. She is a machine. I tried to find something, anything to use against her. But she is perfect. Your sister is perfect. And we are the trash. That is what she thinks, right? He hurled the bottle across the room. It smashed into the 60-inch television, shattering the screen in a spiderweb of cracks. The amber liquid dripped down the broken glass like toxic rain. "Hunter, stop it!" Ebony screamed, covering her ears. He did not stop. He was a man possessed by his own impotence. He grabbed a heavy vase from the mantel, a piece I knew cost $400, and threw it against the wall. It exploded, sending shards of porcelain flying. He kicked the coffee table, overturning it. He ripped the curtains off the rod. "It is all hers," he screamed, tearing at the sofa cushions. "It is all hers anyway. Let her have it in pieces. If I cannot live here, nobody lives here." I watched calmly from my office, my finger hovering over the mouse. I was not frightened. I was calculating. "That represents a destruction of property clause violation," I whispered to myself. I opened the spreadsheet where I was tracking his debt. I added a new line item: damages to interior fixtures and furnishings. Estimated cost $10,000. I watched him rampage, destroying the illusion of the life he had built. He was smashing the things he loved because he finally realized they never belonged to him. He was throwing a tantrum just like his son had thrown that fork. But this time, there was no one to clean up the mess. I picked up my phone and called the private security detail I had on standby. "The tenant is becoming violent and destroying the asset," I said. "He is unstable. I want a 24-hour guard posted at the perimeter. Do not intervene unless he tries to burn the structure down. Let him break the furniture. I will just deduct it from his bankruptcy filing." I hung up and watched Hunter collapse onto the floor amidst the wreckage of his living room. He was sobbing now, great heaving sobs of a man who had lost the game he thought he rigged. "Keep breaking things, Hunter," I thought. "You are only breaking yourself. The house will be renovated. But you are beyond repair." I sat at my desk with a single sheet of paper in front of me. It was not a lawsuit, and it was not a press release. It was a mercy killing. My general counsel, David, had spent the last hour trying to talk me out of it. He wanted to crush Hunter in court. He wanted to drag him through a public trial that would leave him with a criminal record and a mountain of legal fees. But I was not interested in prolonged suffering. I just wanted my property back, and I wanted the toxicity out of my life. I picked up my fountain pen and signed the bottom of the document. It was an ultimatum. The terms were simple and non-negotiable. Option A was the exit ramp. Hunter and Ebony had 48 hours to vacate the premises voluntarily. They had to leave the house in broom-clean condition and hand over the keys. In exchange, I would forgive the entire $1.2 million debt. I would wipe the slate clean. They would walk away with nothing, but they would also walk away with zero liability. It was a golden parachute they did not deserve, but I offered it for the sake of the blood that ran through my sister's veins. Option B was the nuclear option. If they refused to leave, or if they forced me to send the sheriff to evict them, I would file a criminal complaint with the district attorney. During my audit of the loan documents, I had found the smoking gun. When Hunter applied for the loan 3 years ago, he had submitted tax returns claiming an annual income of $600,000. I had cross-referenced those returns with the IRS transcript I pulled during the default process. His actual income that year was $52,000. That is called mortgage fraud. It is a federal crime that carries a sentence of up to 30 years in prison. I handed the envelope to the process server, a man named Carl, who looked like he could walk through a brick wall. "Deliver this to Mr. Davis personally," I said, "and Carl makes sure he reads the second page." I watched on the monitors as Carl pulled up to the mansion an hour later. The house looked dark. The curtains were drawn tight as if the occupants were trying to hide from the world they had tried so hard to impress. Carl rang the bell. He had to ring it 4 times before the door cracked open. Hunter stood there looking like a man who had not slept in days. His shirt was stained, and his eyes were bloodshot. He snatched the envelope from Carl's hand without a word and slammed the door. I switched the camera feed to the foyer. Hunter ripped the envelope open with shaking hands. He leaned against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the expensive imported tile. He read the first page. I saw his shoulders sag with relief when he read the part about debt forgiveness. He realized he had a way out. He could leave. He could start over. Then he turned to the second page. I zoomed in on his face. I wanted to see the exact moment the reality hit him. He read the paragraph detailing the income falsification. He read the statute number I had cited. He read the words, federal prison. His face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. He gasped, clutching his chest. He knew I had him. He knew I had the original falsified documents with his wet signature on them. He was trapped. Just then, Ebony walked into the foyer. She was holding a glass of wine that was filled to the brim. She looked at Hunter sitting on the floor and rolled her eyes. "What is it now?" she asked, her voice slurring slightly. "Is it another bill? Did she turn off the water?" Hunter scrambled to his feet, hiding the letter behind his back. He looked at his wife, the woman he had lied to for years, the woman whose respect he craved more than oxygen. If he told her the truth, if he told her that he was a fraud who was facing prison time, she would leave him. She would take Braden, and she would never look back. His ego was the only thing he had left, and he was terrified of losing it. "It is nothing," Hunter lied, his voice cracking. "Just more threats. She says we have 48 hours to leave or she sends the sheriff." "Is that it?" Ebony asked, taking a sip of wine. "She is bluffing. She cannot kick us out that fast." "Squatters' rights, Hunter. We have rights. We can stay here for months while the courts figure it out." Hunter looked at her. He knew she was wrong. He knew that because of the specific structure of the commercial loan I had used, foreclosure was immediate. But more importantly, he knew that if he fought me, I would send him to jail. He had a choice. Tell his wife the truth and leave quietly, or lie to her and try to fight a war he had already lost. He chose the lie. "You are right, baby," Hunter said, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. "She is bluffing. We are not going anywhere. This is my house. I fixed the leak in the roof. I planted those hedges. I am not letting your sister scare me." I stared at the screen in disbelief. He was declining the lifeboat. He was choosing to stay on the sinking ship because he was too proud to admit he had drilled the hole in the hull. Ebony smiled a nasty, triumphant smile. "That is the man I married. Do not let her win, Hunter. Fight her." I watched Ebony walk back into the living room, leaving Hunter alone in the hallway. He looked at the letter in his hand. He crumbled it up into a ball and shoved it into his pocket. Then he did something that made me sit up straight in my chair. He walked into his home office and locked the door. He went to the safe behind the painting and pulled out a stack of papers. They were the original deed documents, the ones that listed Vanguard Holdings as the lien holder. He turned on his scanner. I zoomed in on his hands. He was holding a bottle of whiteout and a razor blade. He began to carefully scrape away the name Vanguard Holdings from the title document. He was trying to erase my name. He was trying to physically alter a legal document to make it look like he owned the property free and clear. I laughed out loud in my empty office. It was a laugh of pure incredulity. He thought that in the 21st century, where every property record is digitized and stored in a county database, he could trick the sheriff with a photocopied forgery. He thought that if he just showed the police a piece of paper that said he was the owner, they would turn around and leave. It was the act of a desperate, delusional child. He was cutting and pasting his way to a felony. He spent hours in there. I watched him scan the altered document, print it out, scan it again to hide the edit marks, and then print it on heavy cardstock he had found in the drawer. He even tried to forge a notary stamp using a rubber stamp from a child's play set he must have taken from Braden's room. When he was finished, he held it up to the light. It looked terrible. It looked exactly like what it was, a fake document made by a panicked amateur. But Hunter looked at it with pride. He nodded to himself. He unlocked the door and walked out, puffing his chest out. He believed his own lie. He believed he had found a loophole. I picked up my phone and called David. He rejected the offer, I said. "Are you sure?" David asked. "Did he call you?" "No," I said, watching Hunter pour himself a drink to celebrate his forgery. He decided to double down. And David, you might want to call the district attorney's office. Tell them to have a warrant ready. Not just for fraud. Add forgery and tampering with evidence to the list. You are going to send him to prison, David said quietly. No, David, I replied, watching Hunter toast the air with his glass. I gave him a key to the exit. He used it to lock himself in a cell. The 48-hour clock is ticking. Let us see what he does when the sheriff knocks and he hands over that piece of paper. I turned off the monitor. I needed to sleep. I needed to be well rested for eviction day. It was going to be a long morning, and I wanted to look my best when I took back what was mine. The sun set over Highland Park, casting long, ominous shadows across the manicured lawn of the mansion that was no longer a home, but a prison. From the safety of my penthouse office, I watched the feed from the security cameras one last time before the final deadline. The interior of the house looked like the aftermath of a natural disaster. The perfect staging was gone. The curated aesthetic that Ebony had spent 3 years and my money cultivating was in ruins. Cardboard boxes were scattered everywhere, but they were not stacked neatly. They were thrown haphazardly into corners, filled with clothes and shoes that were tossed in with frantic, angry energy. The air in the house was thick enough to choke on. I could see it in the way Ebony moved. She was in the grand foyer, wrapping a porcelain vase in newspaper, but her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it. It did not break, but the sound made her jump. She kicked the vase across the floor, screaming a curse word that echoed off the high ceilings. This was not the composed influencer who lectured her followers on mindfulness and gratitude. This was a woman watching her identity disintegrate in real time. Hunter was nowhere to be found in the packing effort. I switched camera angles and found him in the study. He was sitting in the dark, illuminated only by the glow of the street lamp outside the window. A bottle of expensive scotch sat on the desk next to him, almost empty. He was staring at the wall, mumbling to himself. He was currently existing in a state of suspended reality, where he still believed his forged deed would save him. He had convinced himself that the sheriff would look at his bad Photoshop job and salute him. It was a delusion born of arrogance and fueled by alcohol. Then I saw Braden enter the frame in the living room. The 8-year-old boy looked small amidst the chaos. He was dragging his favorite blanket behind him, looking at the boxes with genuine confusion. For 3 days he had watched his parents scream, cry, and break things, but nobody had actually sat him down to explain what was happening. To him, I was still just the aunt who lived in a bad neighborhood. I was still just the help. He walked up to Ebony, who was trying to jam a winter coat into a box that was already too full. Mom, Braden asked, his voice whining and high-pitched. Why are we putting everything in boxes? Are we going on a trip? Ebony ignored him, shoving the coat down with violent force. Mom, Braden persisted, tugging on her sleeve. I do not want to go on a trip. I want to play video games. Where is my iPad? Ebony spun around. Her hair was a mess and her eyes were wild. Leave me alone, Braden. Go find your father. But I want to know why we are leaving. Braden stomped his foot, the same petulant stomp he had used right before he threw the fork at me. Why do we have to go? Auntie Jasmine is just the help. You said helpers listen to owners. Why do we have to listen to her? The words hung in the air. You said helpers listen to owners. It was the mantra Ebony had taught him. It was the poison she had dripped into his ear to make herself feel superior. But hearing it now, surrounded by the wreckage of her life, hearing her own failure reflected back to her in the innocent arrogance of her son, something inside Ebony snapped. She did not hug him. She did not explain. She exploded. Shut up! Ebony screamed. The sound was primal. It was a release of 3 days of terror and humiliation. Shut up, you stupid boy! Braden recoiled, stumbling back as if she had hit him. He had never been yelled at in his life. He was the golden child, the prince of the manor. We are leaving because of you! Ebony shrieked, stepping toward him, pointing a finger in his face. We are losing everything because you could not sit still and eat your dinner. You threw that fork. You caused a scene. You made her check the cameras. Braden's lip quivered. But you laughed, he whispered. You laughed when I did it. I did not laugh. Ebony lied, gasping for air. I was trying to protect you. And now look. Look around you. We are going to be homeless. We are going to be poor. And it is all your fault. If you had just behaved, we would still be rich. Do you hear me? You ruined us. Braden stood there frozen. The weight of her words crushed him. A child cannot process complex financial fraud or mortgage default. All he understood was that his mother was telling him that he destroyed their world. He looked at the boxes, then at his mother's twisted face, and then he burst into tears. But these were not the fake crocodile tears he used to get his way. These were the terrified sobs of a child whose foundation had just vanished. Ebony did not comfort him. She turned her back on him and went back to packing, leaving him crying in the center of the room. I watched from my office, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. I had wanted justice, but watching a mother scapegoat her child to protect her own ego was sickening. She was destroying his psyche to save her own narrative. The noise of Braden's crying finally roused Hunter from the study. He stumbled into the living room, swaying on his feet. He looked at his crying son and his frantic wife, and his face twisted into a sneer. "Shut him up!" Hunter slurred, leaning against the doorframe. "I am trying to think." "You think Ebony yelled, throwing a roll of packing tape at him? You have been drinking all day. You said you had a plan." "Where is the plan, Hunter?" "I have a plan," Hunter shouted, pushing himself off the wall. "The plan is to tell that witch she cannot touch us. I am the man of this house." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. My desk phone lit up. "Incoming call from Hunter Davis." I did not answer. I let it ring. I wanted him to leave a record. I wanted the judge to hear exactly what state of mind he was in the night before eviction. The voicemail system picked up. I turned up the volume on my speakers so I could hear him leaving the message in real time. Jasmine Hunter's voice boomed through my office, distorted by rage and whiskey. "Pick up the phone, you coward. You think you can scare me with your letters. You think you can send the sheriff to my house." I heard the sound of glass breaking in the background, followed by Ebony screaming at him to stop. "This is my property," Hunter continued, screaming into the phone. "I have the deed. I fixed the title. You are nothing but a jealous, lonely woman who wants what I have. Well, you cannot have it. If you send the police here tomorrow, I will sue you for harassment. I will tell them you forged the loan. I will tell them you are the fraud." He paused, breathing heavily. "And do not think you are special because you have money," he spat. "You are still beneath us. You are still just the girl who fetched the coffee. You will always be the help, Jasmine, and tomorrow when I show the sheriff my papers, you are going to be the one in handcuffs. So bring it on. Come and get me." The line clicked dead. I sat in the silence of my office, the recording file saving automatically to the cloud. He had just threatened me, admitted to tampering with the title, and confessed to his own malice, all in a 60-second voicemail. He was not just digging his grave, he was pouring the concrete over his own feet. I looked back at the monitor. Hunter had collapsed onto the sofa, passing out with the phone still in his hand. Ebony was sitting on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes, staring blankly at the wall. Braden had curled up in a ball under the dining room table, clutching his blanket, fast asleep from exhaustion. They were a portrait of absolute defeat. They had turned on each other before I had even lifted a finger. The fear of losing their status had stripped away the thin veneer of family, leaving only resentment and blame. I saved the audio file and forwarded it to the sheriff's office and my attorney with a short note. "Subject: threat assessment for eviction. Please be advised that the tenant is intoxicated, hostile, and has made verbal threats regarding the eviction scheduled for tomorrow morning. He has also indicated he intends to present forged documents to law enforcement. Please proceed with caution." I turned off the lights in my office. The city outside was alive and moving, but inside that house time had stopped. They were waiting for the end of the world. And tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp, I was going to deliver it. I walked to the elevator feeling the weight of the moment. I was not angry anymore. I was ready. The fork had been thrown, the insults had been screamed, and now the bill was due. The digital clock on the dashboard of my armored SUV flipped to 8 o'clock. It was a crisp morning in Highland Park, the kind of day where the air smells of freshly cut grass and old money. But today, the scent of pine was overpowered by the smell of diesel exhaust from the caravan of vehicles I had assembled. I was not alone. Behind me was a sheriff department cruiser with its lights flashing silently. Behind that was a large box truck from a moving company I had hired to clear the property. And flanked on either side of my car were two private security contractors, big men in dark suits, whose job was to ensure that the fork thrown at Thanksgiving was the last time anyone in that family touched me. "It is time," David, my lawyer, said from the seat next to me. He looked nervous. He was used to corporate boardrooms, not tactical extractions. I nodded and opened the door, stepping out onto the pavement. My heels clicked against the asphalt, a sharp, rhythmic sound that signaled the end of the grace period. I buttoned my trench coat against the wind and walked toward the front door, where the sheriff was already pounding with a heavy-gloved fist. "Hunter Davis, open this door," the sheriff boomed, his voice echoing off the brick facade. "This is the sheriff department executing a court order for immediate possession. You have 10 seconds to comply before we breach." There was no answer. The house stood silent and dark, the curtains drawn tight like eyelids shut against a nightmare. "Breach it," the sheriff ordered, stepping back. The locksmith I had brought along stepped forward. He did not use a key. He used a heavy-duty drill. The sound of metal grinding against metal tore through the quiet morning. It was a violent sound, the sound of privacy being violated, the sound of consequences arriving uninvited. Within seconds, the lock gave way with a sad metallic crunch. The door swung open, revealing the grand foyer where I had been insulted just days ago. Hunter was standing right there. He looked like a man who had been haunting his own house. His eyes were wild and bloodshot, his shirt was unbuttoned, and he was holding a piece of paper in his shaking hand. "Get out!" Hunter screamed, waving the paper at the armed officers. "You cannot come in here. This is my house. I have the deed. Look, I have the deed. I have." He thrust the document toward the sheriff. It was the forgery he had spent the night making. The whiteout was lumpy and the font did not match, but in his desperate delusion he believed it was a magic shield. The sheriff did not even look at it. He swatted the paper aside like a fly. "Hunter Davis, you are interfering with a lawful eviction. Step aside now." "No," Hunter roared, backing up. "She is lying. That woman is a fraud. She is trying to steal my home." He spotted me then. I was standing behind the wall of police officers, calm and silent. The sight of me broke whatever fragile hold he had left on his sanity. The humiliation of the last few days, the loss of his status, the fear of the future, it all boiled over into a singular blind rage. "You!" he shrieked. "You did this! You ruined everything!" He did not run away. He ran at me. He lowered his shoulder and charged through the gap between two deputies, moving with the desperate speed of a cornered animal. His hands were reaching for my throat, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I watched him come. Before he could get within 5 feet of me, my lead security officer intercepted him. It was not a fight. It was physics. The guard stepped in, caught Hunter's momentum, and drove him into the marble floor with a bone-jarring thud. Hunter gasped as the air left his lungs. "Stay down!" the guard commanded, pressing a knee into Hunter's back. Hunter struggled, thrashing against the weight. But then the sheriff was there. I heard the distinct metallic click of handcuffs ratcheting tight. "Get off me!" Hunter yelled, spitting onto the floor. "I am the victim here. Arrest her!" Hunter Davis, the sheriff said, hauling him to his feet. "You are under arrest for assault on a law enforcement officer and resisting eviction. And we also have a warrant from the FBI for wire fraud and forgery. You have the right to remain silent." Hunter went limp. The fight drained out of him instantly, replaced by the crushing reality of the words "federal warrant." He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. He realized then that I had not just come for the house. I had come for his freedom. "Where is my wife?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "She is next," I said, simply, speaking for the first time. The deputies led Hunter out. He stumbled, his expensive Italian loafers dragging on the ground. As they pushed him into the back of the cruiser, I walked into the living room. It smelled of stale alcohol and fear. Ebony was hiding in the kitchen. She was sitting on the floor behind the island, clutching a half-packed box of silverware. When she saw the officers enter, she did not scream. She tried to bargain. "Wait!" she pleaded, standing up and smoothing her rumpled dress. "We can leave. We just need more time. My husband is handling this. He has the paperwork." "Your husband is in handcuffs, Mrs. Davis," the sheriff said. "And you need to vacate the premises immediately. You can take personal items only. Everything else stays." Ebony looked at me standing in the doorway. Her makeup was smeared down her cheeks in black streaks, making her look like a tragic clown. The arrogance was gone. The influencer persona was gone. All that was left was a scared woman who had bet on the wrong horse. "Jasmine, please," she whispered. "Where are we supposed to go?" "I do not know, Ebony," I said honestly. "Maybe you should ask the followers you lied to, or maybe you can stay in the warehouse where you stored your empathy years ago." The deputies took her by the arms. She did not fight, but her legs gave out and they had to half carry her toward the door. Outside, the neighborhood had woken up. The commotion had drawn a crowd. Neighbors in jogging suits and bathrobes were lining the sidewalk. And because this is America in the 21st century, the phones were out. I saw the flashes. I saw the vertical screens recording the downfall of the family that had looked down on everyone else. Ebony saw them too. As she was led down the front steps, she tried to cover her face with her hands, but it was too late. She was being live-streamed. The woman who lived for likes was now going viral for her eviction. I heard a neighbor whisper loudly, "Is that the lady who said her sister was the help? Karma is real." I walked out onto the porch and watched them load Ebony into the back of a separate car, not under arrest, but detained for removal. Then I remembered Brayden. I turned back to the house. The movers were already coming in with boxes. "Stop," I ordered. "Where is the boy?" I ran up the stairs to the second floor. I found him in his bedroom. He was sitting on his bed wearing his headphones, clutching a gaming controller, staring at a blank TV screen. He had turned the volume up so high to drown out the shouting downstairs. He looked up when I entered. He looked terrified. "Are you going to send me to jail too?" he asked, his voice trembling. "No, Brayden," I said, softening my voice, kneeling down so I was at eye level with him. "Children do not go to jail for the mistakes of their parents." I reached out a hand. He flinched, thinking I might hit him. It broke my heart to see what this week had done to him. "Come with me," I said gently. "I called your grandmother. She is waiting for you outside in a taxi. She is going to take you to get pancakes." He dropped the controller and took my hand. His palm was sweaty. We walked down the stairs, past the movers, past the empty spot where the vase used to be. When we got outside, I walked him past the police cars, past his father, who was banging his head against the window of the cruiser, and past his mother, who was weeping into her hands. I led him straight to the waiting yellow cab, where my mother Beatrice sat. She looked aged 10 years in the last 10 days. She would not look me in the eye. "Take care of him, Mother," I said, opening the door. "And tell him the truth. Do not let him grow up thinking the world owes him something." I closed the door and watched the taxi drive away. I stood alone on the driveway of the house I owned. The lawn was littered with the debris of the morning. The neighbors were starting to disperse, the show over. The sheriff walked up to me, tipping his hat. "The property is secured, Ms. Washington. We will have the locks changed within the hour." "Thank you, Sheriff," I said. I looked up at the house. It was a beautiful structure, but it was tainted. I picked up my phone and called my real estate agent. "List it," I said. "What price do you want to set?" she asked. I do not care about the price, I said, walking back to my car. Just sell it. Sell it today. I want it gone. I want the money donated to the women's shelter downtown. Every cent of it. I climbed into my SUV and closed the door, shutting out the noise of the sirens and the whispers. I checked my reflection in the mirror. The bandage on my cheek was gone, leaving only a faint pink scar. It would heal. Everything heals eventually once you remove the infection. I told the driver to take me to the office. I had a business to run, and for the first time in my life, I had absolutely nothing standing in my way. The dust did not settle quickly after the eviction. In fact, it hung in the air for months, choking the life out of the false narratives my family had spent years constructing. I watched from a distance as the legal system did what I had started, dismantling Hunter's life brick by brick. The investigation into the mortgage fraud was merely the loose thread that unraveled the entire sweater. When the forensic accountants dug into Hunter's finances, they found more than just a falsified loan application. They found a complex web of money laundering schemes involving offshore crypto wallets and shell companies he had used to hide losses from his investors. The trial was swift and brutal. Hunter tried to plead ignorance, he tried to blame his partners, and he even tried to blame the pressure of maintaining a lifestyle for his wife. But the federal prosecutors were not interested in his excuses. They had the receipts. I sat in the back of the courtroom on the day of the sentencing. Hunter stood before the judge in a suit that no longer fit him properly, his frame gaunt from stress. When the gavel came down, sentencing him to 5 years in federal prison, he did not look at Ebony. He looked at me. His eyes were not filled with hate anymore, but with a terrifying realization of his own smallness. He was led away in handcuffs, leaving behind a legacy of debt and disgrace. For Ebony, the fall was perhaps even harder because she had to live through it in the public eye. The viral video of her eviction had branded her. She was no longer the envy of the suburbs, she was a cautionary tale. With Hunter's assets seized and his accounts frozen, she had no choice but to move. She and Braden ended up in a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex near the airport where the roar of jet engines shook the thin walls every 10 minutes. It was a far cry from the marble floors and silence of Highland Park. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Ebony tried to maintain her dignity at first, but dignity requires currency she no longer possessed. The reality of survival set in quickly. She applied for jobs positions she would have scoffed at a year ago. She walked into a high-end department store, applying for a sales associate position, thinking her knowledge of luxury brands would be an asset. But the digital footprint is forever. During her interview, the manager simply turned his computer screen around. On it was the video of her screaming at the police, the video where she blamed her 8-year-old son for their poverty. "We cannot have someone with this kind of volatility representing our brand," the manager told her. Ebony was escorted out of the store she used to shop in, humiliated and empty-handed. She ended up working stocking shelves at a discount grocery store on the night shift, wearing a uniform that smelled of bleach, trying to hide her face from customers who might recognize her. Braden was the collateral damage that kept me awake at night. He was pulled out of his private school because the tuition checks bounced. He was thrust into a public school mid-semester, confused and angry, without his iPad or his designer sneakers. He was a boy who had been raised to believe he was a prince only to find out his castle was made of sand. I set up a trust fund for his education, one that nobody in the family knows about. He will get it when he turns 21, provided he goes to therapy and breaks the cycle of narcissism his parents trapped him in. Then there was my mother, Beatrice. The church had always been her stage, the place where she performed her role as the pious matriarch. But the church is also a community of judgment. When the news of Hunter's imprisonment broke, the ladies of the prayer circle did not offer casseroles and comfort. They offered cold shoulders and whispers. Beatrice arrived at service one Sunday to find her usual seat in the front row occupied by someone else. No one moved to make room for her. The pastor who had once praised her family's generosity now preached sermons about the sin of pride and the worship of false idols, looking directly at her. She stopped going to church. Isolated and with her son-in-law in prison, she faced her own financial reckoning. Hunter had been her retirement plan, Without his sporadic handouts, she could not afford her lifestyle. I saw her once from across the street walking into a pawn shop downtown. She was clutching her jewelry box, the velvet case that held the pearls and diamonds she had flaunted for decades. She sold them one by one, not to buy luxury items, but to buy groceries for Braden and to pay the heating bill in Ebony's drafty apartment. The woman who had looked down on me for living simply was now selling the symbols of her status just to survive. 3 months after the eviction, I finally returned to the house. I drove up the driveway in my G-Wagon, the engine purring softly. The house stood empty, a hollow shell of brick and glass. The landscaping was overgrown, the hedges untrimmed, a visual representation of the neglect that had always rotted beneath the surface. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air was stale, smelling of dust and abandoned dreams. I walked through the foyer where Hunter had tried to attack me. I walked into the dining room where the fork had been thrown. I stood in the kitchen where Ebony had sliced fruit and sneered at my career. My real estate agent was waiting for me holding a clipboard. "It is a beautiful structure, Ms. Washington," she said, looking around. "With a little staging, we could get top dollar. The market is hot. We should keep the chandeliers and maybe polish the marble. It has good bones." I looked at the walls. I did not see good bones. I saw the ghosts of insults. I saw the corners where I was told to make myself small. I saw the dining table where I was relegated to the help. This house was not a home. It was a monument to their greed and my pain. "No," I said, my voice echoing in the empty room. "Excuse me," the agent asked. "I do not want to sell it like this," I said, walking over to the wall and running my hand along the expensive wainscoting. "This interior is poisoned. It holds too many memories and none of them are good. I do not want another family to move in here and absorb this energy." I turned to the agent. "Call the contractor," I said. "I want it gutted." "Gutted," she exclaimed, her eyes wide. "But the finishes are imported. The cabinetry is custom. That is hundreds of thousands of dollars in value." "I do not care about the value," I said, walking toward the door. "Tear it all out. The floors, the walls, the fixtures, the lights. Strip it down to the studs. I want to sell the shell. Let the new owners build something real, something honest. I want every trace of what happened here erased." I walked out of the house without looking back. Behind me, I could hear the agent making the call, her voice confused but compliant. I stood on the porch and took a deep breath of the cool air. The sun was shining, and for the first time in my life, the shadow of that house did not touch me. I had not just evicted my family, I had evicted the past. And as I drove away, leaving the empty mansion behind, I knew that the only thing I was taking with me was my dignity and the bright, unwritten future that lay ahead. 6 months have passed since the day the locksmith drilled through the front door of the mansion in Highland Park. 6 months since the sirens faded and the live stream ended. The seasons in Chicago have turned. The biting wind of that terrible November has given way to a gentle spring, and now the city is warming into early summer. But the biggest change is not in the weather. It is in the silence. My life used to be filled with the noise of my family's demands, the constant ringing of my phone with requests for money, the backhanded compliments, the chaos of their manufactured drama. Now my life is quiet, and I have learned that peace is the most expensive luxury in the world. I spent my morning at the community center on the South Side. This is my new passion project. It is a nonprofit organization I founded called the Legacy Fund. We teach financial literacy to underprivileged children. We teach them about compound interest, about credit scores, about the difference between an asset and a liability. Things I learned on my own. Things Hunter and Ebony never bothered to learn because they thought looking rich was the same thing as being wealthy. I stood at the front of the classroom watching 20 faces looking up at me. These children do not have mansions. Some of them do not even have winter coats, but they have a hunger in their eyes that my nephew Braden never had. I picked up a marker and wrote a number on the whiteboard. "This is $85,000, I said to the class. This is the average amount of debt a college graduate carries. Now who can tell me how long it takes to pay this off if you only make the minimum payment? A little girl in the front row raised her hand. Her name is Maya. She is 10 years old, and she reminds me of myself at that age. She is quiet, observant, and wears clothes that are clean but second-hand. 30 years, Maya guessed. That is right, Maya, I said, smiling. 30 years. That is a life sentence. But if you understand how money works, you can break the chains. I looked at her and felt a surge of pride. I am building a new family here. A family not bound by blood, but by a shared desire to rise above our circumstances. I am giving these children the tools to protect themselves from people like Hunter. I am arming them with knowledge so they will never have to be the help. They will be the owners. When I returned to my office in the afternoon, there was a stack of mail on my desk. My assistant knows to filter out the junk, but there are some things she leaves for me to handle personally. On top of the pile was a letter with a prison stamp on the corner. The return address was the Federal Correctional Institution in Terre Haute. It was from inmate number 89402. Hunter. I sat down in my leather chair and stared at the envelope. I did not want to open it. I knew what it would say. But curiosity is a human flaw, so I slid it open with my silver letter opener. The handwriting was cramped and shaky. Dear Jasmine, I have found God in here. The chaplain says I need to make amends. I am sorry for what I did. I was lost. I was blinded by greed. Please tell Ebony I love her. Please tell her to write to me. And Jasmine, if you could find it in your heart to put some money on my commissary account, I would appreciate it. The food in here is terrible. I read it twice. He had found God, but he still wanted money. He was apologizing, but he was still asking for a favor. He had not changed. He was just a con artist running a new con in a smaller cage. I did not finish the letter. I did not save it. I walked over to the shredder in the corner of my office. I fed the letter into the machine, watching Hunter's words turn into confetti. It was a satisfying sound, the sound of a connection being permanently severed. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize, but I knew immediately who it was. Jasmine, please. It is Ebony. We are getting evicted from the apartment. I cannot pay the rent. Brayden needs new glasses. I know you hate me, but please help your nephew. Just $5,000. I will pay you back, I swear. I looked at the screen. I thought about the little girl Maya in my class this morning. I thought about the scholarship fund I had just endowed for her. I am not a cruel person. I give away thousands of dollars every month. But I give it to people who are willing to do the work. I give it to people who respect the value of a dollar. Ebony did not want help. She wanted a bailout. She wanted to return to the comfort of dependency. If I sent her that money, I would not be helping her. I would be enabling the same toxicity that destroyed her life. I did not reply. I tapped the info icon on the screen. I scrolled down to the bottom. I pressed block caller. The message disappeared. The silence returned. I drove home as the sun began to set, painting the Chicago skyline in hues of purple and gold. I stopped at a gourmet market on the way. I bought a small organic turkey breast. I bought fresh cranberries. I bought a bottle of the most expensive champagne they had. It is Thanksgiving today. I arrived at my penthouse and kicked off my heels. I turned on some jazz music, letting the saxophone fill the empty space. I did not feel lonely. I felt spacious. I felt like I finally had room to breathe. I set the table. My dining table is made of solid walnut. It seats 12, but tonight it is set for 1. I laid out the placemat. I lit a beeswax candle. And then I went to the drawer. I pulled out my silverware. It is real silver, heavy and cool to the touch. I polished it myself this morning. I picked up the fork. I held it up to the light, examining the tines. It looked just like the one Brayden had thrown at me, but this one was mine. I earned it. I paid for it. and nobody was going to throw it at me ever again. I sat down at the head of the table. There was no shouting. There was no criticism about my job or my clothes. There was no kids' table in the corner. I served myself. The food smelled incredible, roasted herbs and butter. I took a sip of champagne. The bubbles danced on my tongue. I looked out the window at the city lights twinkling below me. Somewhere out there in that vast grid of electricity, Hunter was sitting in a cell eating off a plastic tray. Somewhere out there, Ebony was sitting in a dark apartment wondering where it all went wrong. And here I was. They used to tell me I was nothing. They used to tell me I should be grateful for the scraps they threw from their table. They mistook my silence for weakness and my patience for submission. They thought they could use me and discard me because I was just the help. I cut a piece of turkey with my silver knife and speared it with my silver fork. I took a bite. It tasted like victory. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. I saw a woman who was whole. I saw a woman who had walked through the fire and came out made of steel. They were right about one thing. I was the help. I helped them. I helped them face the truth they had been running from for years. I helped them understand the consequences of their actions. I helped them dismantle the house of cards they had built on a foundation of lies. I cleaned up their mess by removing them from my life. That is a service. A very expensive service. And the price for that service was everything they had. I raised my glass to the empty room, to the quiet, to the peace. Happy Thanksgiving. Jasmine, I whispered to myself. I finished my meal in silence. When I was done, I washed my own plate. I dried my own fork. I put everything away in its proper place. Then I turned off the lights and went to sleep in a bed that I own, in a building that I own, in a life that I own completely. The story is over. The debt is paid, and I am finally free. This story reminds us that true power does not scream, it moves in silence. Hunter and Ebony built their lives on the shifting sands of arrogance and debt, believing that status could replace character. They mistook Jasmine's quiet grace for submission, forgetting that the person holding the foundation has the power to pull the plug. The most profound lesson here is that you cannot demand respect you are unwilling to give, and family is defined by behavior, not blood. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is remove yourself from toxicity, proving that self-worth is the only currency that never devalues. If you have ever had to build your own table because you were denied a seat at theirs, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience. Share your own story of setting boundaries in the comments below. I read every single one.